You're listening to the Night Demon Network. Go to nightdemon.net/subscriber to unlock more exclusive content.
Welcome to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Nesbit, and this week we're diving back into the history of Night Demon and the year 2013, which is a huge year for Night Demon. This is Night Demon, the early years. So moving into 2013, which is a huge year for Night Demon, physical release of the EP, new material, new tours, major lineup changes. 2013 is probably the most significant year in Night Demon's formation in moving from a fun side project into a major metal force. Here's Jarvis Leatherby.
2013 was a very monumental year for Night Demon. A lot of stuff happened in 2013, and this was the year that we had decided to take it seriously, and not only that, but really take it to the next level and put everything we had into it. Now, that's not to say that it was an easy walk through the park. There were a lot of obstacles in the way, but we persevered, and this is the story of that.
So 2013 starts off right away with live shows. So January 5th, 2013, Night Demon plays a show at Billy O's in Ventura, California with Castle and Sutratma.
Right off the bat, I remember right after New Year's, we had a show at Billy O's, the Irish bar that I've mentioned before on this podcast, kind of like the local dive where punk and metal bands could play. And Eddie Numskull threw us on with this band Castle that was on Prosthetic Records. They were a three-piece band from Canada that had just moved to LA, and they were touring heavily. They were touring a lot.
Hold your breath. Go right between the eyes ahead. Kill it all if it fits. Skin rolls cold, now wind blow. Turn your face into the pouring rain. No one knows, a friend or foe, until the moment that it's too late. A deadly blow, the hammer's throw. The sending dogs and the burning lake. The wind that hums to the here and now. Secrets of the great lion way.
Also, Brent's other band, Sutratma, was on the bill with a couple of our other friends in that band, that were in that band from various other Santa Barbara bands. But Sutratma was really interesting. Actually, their subgenre is considered funeral doom. So they're basically a doom metal band that's really slow. I remember our friend Martin, who played drums, he had to wear headphones because they had to play to a click track because it's 60 BPM is the tempo that they play at. anybody who knows anything about music, I'm sure these days you can look it up on the internet, 60 BPM metronome. It's very slow. It's so slow that he needed it to keep time. But anyway, I digress. They were a great band. And, you know, we would occasionally end up on bills like this where Brent was doing double duty. In the later days, it was me doing double duty. But back in the early days here, it just happened, you know, whether Night Demon was playing with The Fucking Wrath or playing with a band like Sutratma. And I remember something very significant and specific about this gig. It was the winter time. It was pretty cold. And Dusty had been playing in New Liberty at the time, and he had recently broken up with his girlfriend. And, you know, there's an old stereotype and an old joke in the musician world. And it's a stereotype because it's generally true. It's a generalization because it's generally true. And it's, what do you call a musician without a girlfriend? And the punchline to that is homeless. So he had just broken up with his girlfriend, and he was homeless. He was living at her apartment. He didn't have a place to live. So he was back in the New Liberty RV sleeping in parking lots. But this thing had been musty as hell. At this time, nobody had lived in there in over a year. There was like leaks in the roof and stuff. And it was just a pretty shitty situation for him. So Armand would let him sleep at his studio a lot, even when he wasn't around, which was very cool.
We had broken up one time and then gotten back together. But the first time that we broke up, I ended up roadieing for Night Demon, doing lights and helping them plug things in on the changeover. They were playing with the band Castle. And, you know, I was homeless again because I didn't have my girlfriend, and we were, you know, she stayed in the place. And then I ended up staying with my buddy Willie Love, who I moved cross country with from New Liberty. And he was staying in this like run down old house that was like leaning to one side. And there was like, not that it was a crack den, but it was very, very close to that. And it was rough conditions, dirty. I don't know. It was a roof over my head at that point in time. I think I stayed there for like, I don't know, 3.5 weeks, and it felt like an eternity. Yeah. So it was a pretty crazy time to be out here and doing it. So I worked this gig with Night Demon for the Castle I think they opened for Castle, and I came in and helped them. It was when John was playing drums.
And I remember on this specific night, you know, I mean, he's got no girlfriend anymore. He doesn't have much to do. And he wanted to come to this gig with us. And he said, hey, I'll roadie for you guys. So we're like, oh, that's awesome. So, but it was just so interesting seeing him like tuning John Crerar's drums and just all this kind of drummer stuff that I was like, man, this is incredible. Like, you know, we had been friends for a few years by this point, Dusty and I. But, you know, I wasn't in a band with him. We had just done a couple side gigs here and there together. And, you know, I didn't really hang out with him much one-on-one besides the times I was hanging out with him and the rest of the New Liberty guys. Actually, I take that back. There was one time that Dusty actually saved my life. And that's a whole nother story. But I was actually blacked out, and I don't remember any of it.
The night that I saved Jarvis's life. Okay, so I called it Jarvis's big day out. He was hanging out with our friend Sam Bole, and we went to I was hanging out with some friends that night. We ended up going to this like after hours bar that I'd never been to, and I don't think I ever went to again. you had to go upstairs. You go into this like bar, and we were having some drinks, hanging out. Next thing you know, Sam and Jarvis show up. Sam kind of gives me like a look, and I'm just kind of like, all right. And Sam's like, I'm out of here. He's all yours. So he just like leaves him with us because obviously Jarvis was on one. And there's a funny picture. I don't know where it is, but I'm like standing there and Jarvis has his mouth so far in my ear, just like pulling me towards him and like just like yelling in my ear, like just yell talking, I don't even know what he was talking about, but the picture of the sheer terror on my face and like uncomfortable look. I mean, that's a picture, that's, what is the term? A picture is worth 1,000 words. That's it right there. So that was the start. So now Jarvis is like hanging out with us. I think it was me, my buddy Shane, Willie, like the New Liberty crew, right? And we ended up going to our friend Tiffany's house because Willie was like rooming with her at the time. And Jarvis actually lived like not even a half a block away, like literally like was like diagonal on the street that he lived on. And he came into the house and he was just like on fire, like on his back, on the floor. Like, I think she had a Christmas tree up at the time. It was around Christmas time or something. He's like messing with the Christmas tree, talking about all kinds of stuff that we had no idea what he was talking about. Like, I had it recorded. I had the whole thing recorded on my old iPhone. I had like an iPhone 3. And I think I downloaded it onto my old Mac, but I don't know. Since then, this file has been long gone. But it was like 45 minutes of him just rambling and talking, and it was a rough one. Actually, now I think about it, I wonder what year that was. It had to have been maybe like, I don't even think 19 was around yet. It was either 2010 or 2011. Like maybe right from when 2010 turned into 2011. I'm not quite sure, but that was an interesting one. So we like, I think we ended up like walking him home then because it was so close, and like I don't think he knew where he was. He pretty much blacked out. So I'm glad those days are over, for him, for his sake and for ours.
So besides the night that I blacked out and he saved my life, which I'm still grateful for because I'm grateful to be alive, we didn't hang out much together one-on-one. So this was a kind of an opportunity to, just talk a little more about stuff. And I remember that night we went across the street from Billy's was an old Italian restaurant in Ventura called Ferraro's. Unfortunately, they did not make it through the pandemic, but they were open for decades, and it was an amazing old school Italian place. And they always had, like autographed 8x10 glossies on the wall framed of all the famous people that had eaten there and stuff. But they had an 8x10 of our buddies Cirith Ungol, the only other real metal band that ever made it out from Ventura. And that's the first night that Dusty, who are these guys? And we're like, oh boy, okay, like there's a long story here, but I'll always remember that was the first night that he knew about those guys. And this was 3 years before we had reunited the band, so it's pretty cool to look back on that.
We went to Ferraro's across the street from the club Billy's that they were playing. I saw the Cirith Ungol picture on the wall because they, Brent and Jarvis pointed it out. And I was like, Cirith Ungol? I was like, I never heard of them. And they had it like signed because it was like an Italian restaurant. And I don't know, I'm sure Rob probably went there over the years because he's always the one that gives people all kinds of promotional stuff like that. And he signed it and whatnot. So that was actually the first time that I had heard about Cirith Ungol, and Brent was like, yeah, I actually have some of their records. And They kind of gave me a little bit of a synopsis on the band, and they were signed to Enigma, and Poison was on Enigma, so that's the only thing that like rang a bell with me. I was like, oh, that's rad. And that was my first introduction to the band, and my first introduction into Night Demon after I'd seen them live at least once or twice at that point. And then Jarvis asked me to come in and help them with lights and gave me like $25 or something like that for coming out. And so that was interesting. I had no idea I was going to be in the band.
The gig went really well, and it wasn't well attended, but I mean, we were just kind of doing this thing. It didn't matter on weeknights or whatever. When we got called to gigs, we would just do it to go out and play and hopefully sell a couple t-shirts, make a few bucks, turn on some new fans. And we just loved playing heavy metal. I mean, shit, why not? And I remember Dusty let the guys from Castle sleep at Armand's studio that night because he was kind of like studio sitting, I guess you could say. And that was really cool. So, the thing, I guess the main point here is that this is at the beginning of 2013, we really started to develop camaraderie with other bands from, different regional areas or even other states and countries, just touring bands. We were all about that. We started to develop a camaraderie, and we thought we better start hooking up people here because when we leave, we're going to need that too. We're not going to be able to afford to stay at a hotel or anything like that. I mean, keep in mind, we're still in the stage of this is a really fun outlet for us, and by no means is this going to be a way of life for us. And that was in, those were those earlier stages of denial. And we pushed on through that for sure. Later on, in the month of January of 2013, we had a little bit of a situation at our rehearsal space. So, even though we're trekking along and this is the year that we're really pushing that a lot of things would happen, our lives would completely change, and we would make the transition and morph into a full-time heavy metal band. No dream, no journey goes on without its fair share of obstacles. And so here we are. We have this practice space. It's right next to the captain's quarters, Armand's studio, which at the time was called Satellite Studios. And we have all these bands sharing this awesome big warehouse, and it made the rent super cheap. There was plenty of room for everybody's gear. I mean, we were all set up in the same room, but there was, like I said, there was plenty of space. This place was the birth of Night Demon, and it was just, we had already developed some memories there, and we were comfortable there. It was awesome.
Here's former Night Demon drummer John Crerar.
So, like all bands, you need a place to jam. And for a long time, the Wrath had a warehouse out in Santa Paula. And, we know Armand. We always record with Armand. And he said, hey, guys, there's a place next to you opening up. So Craig, the singer of the Wrath, looked into it, contacted the property manager, got us in there. And, it was awesome. It was like a big old warehouse with like 2 other rooms in there. And so it was the Wrath, Stop Breathing, Catholic Spit, and I think Glass and Ashes were jamming in there. And then, of course, Night Demon started jamming in there too once they started jamming. And then once I joined the band, we all jammed there together. But there is a warehouse next to it that we're pretty sure the guy who rented it out started living in there. And so he started complaining to the property manager that we were just too loud, even though it's in a warehouse district where you could be as loud as you want, really. But he had the warehouse for like 20 years or something. So he had higher priority than we did, the new kids on the block, so to speak.
But the guy next door was just always complaining about the noise. And so what Craig decided to do, the singer of the fucking Wrath, he decided to do a benefit show at Billy O's again. This is basically for the practice space. And his idea was to have every band play. Every band that was rehearsing here play and just raise money so that we can buy some lumber and maybe even hire a contractor or something to professionally build out, you know, some way to kind of soundproof this thing a little bit more. I mean, soundproofing, you know, we can all tell you from experiences, it's near impossible. You can't really soundproof anything unless you have like 6 feet of concrete all around you, including the ceiling and stuff, you know, at the decibel levels that we play at. But I mean, even that is just like, fuck. I mean, you got to breathe, right? So anyway, but there are ways to dampen it.
Let's do a benefit show where we could build out better soundproofing rooms so it won't annoy them more, you know, so we could make this work. So we play a benefit show at Billy O's, which is the local bar at the time that, you know, basically anything goes inside there, which was always cool. So we had all the bands that practiced there, plus a couple of our friends who didn't practice there.
So we were on that path. That's what we were doing. And so we did this show. The lineup of the show was The Fucking Wrath, Stop Breathing, Messenger, Night Demon, Super Champ, and Power. So these are all the bands that practice in this same space. Actually, you know what? I think No Say also rehearsed there. There was another band. There were so many bands rehearsing in the same spot. But again, we had enough space. It was a great situation. So the show went well. We raised enough money to make something happen here. And it was all hands on deck. It was like all the guys in the bands came down. And we had a friend of Craig's who was a contractor who just basically kind of helped us out and gave us advice on what to do. And, you know, he lifted a hammer too, you know, but, you know, we ended up doing all this structural stuff and putting up some walls and, you know, laying stuff into the foundation of the concrete. And it just didn't work. The guy just kept complaining. And before we knew it, I mean, we were basically thrown out. So it's not just Night Demon without a rehearsal space. It's all of these bands. It was pretty fucked.
And we raised a bunch of money, bought a bunch of supplies, started building out the room. And the guy next door still was not convinced and was not happy, pretty much because we're sure he was living there. So he got us kicked out. And then we had to move across the train tracks, literally across the train tracks, to Rick Hunter's practice space where Jarvis used to jam with some of his old bands way back in the day. So we were back in familiar territory at the Hunters.
You know, The Fucking Wrath and Stop Breathing, the other two bands that John Crerar was in at the time, ended up getting a space. Brent was also in The Fucking Wrath, as we know. But they ended up getting a very, very small rehearsal space at Rick Hunter's studio, which is literally right up. It's on the same street that we're on here. But you know, I mean, it's just the conditions are a lot different, and it's much smaller. But you know, it's a magical place. It's been there for as long as I can remember. I actually remember being in my first band, being in Black Opal, and my mom taking me to this place that's being built, and that's where I met Rick. And you know, come to pass. I mean, No Motive rehearsed there. Armand's old studio was there, and there's only like 10 rooms in this whole place, but it's a magical place. A lot of great music has been created there. A lot of great stuff has come out of there. And it's been a part of the local music community for so long. And it's kind of the place, like only cool bands go there too. And you kind of got to know about it. So Night Demon was able to practice in the room that the fucking Wrath and Stop Breathing was paying for a monthly lockout on. And so we chipped in some money. Like I said, Brent and John was in 2 of the other bands and Brent was in one of them. So John ends up being in 3 bands that practices at the same place. And so, it worked out. And there was a lot of magic there. There was a lot of magic in that building. And, everything does happen for a reason. And that's where we wrote pretty much like most of the Curse of the Damned album. So, again, our friends and our friends in bands and us personally, I mean, we're always trying to make the best effort that we can to just, facilitate our own stuff. But it doesn't matter when you're playing rock and roll, when you're playing heavy rock, there's always going to be something that stands in the way.
Hey guys, Nesbitt here. If you'd like to support Night Demon and this podcast, the best way to do it is to become a Night Demon subscriber. Not only will you be doing your part to support a true heavy metal band out there really living it, you'll also gain access to a ton of extras. Bonus audio content, a subscriber-only merch store with rare items from the band's archives. You can stream never-before-heard demos and unearthed live concerts from the live vaults. Communicate with the other Night Demon diehards on an exclusive subscriber forum, and gain early access to all press releases, album pre-orders, new merchandise, and a ton more. And another thing that I think is pretty cool is Night Demon will be donating 10% of every subscription fee to the Metal Cares Foundation, which is a charitable fund the band started in 2014 to aid those in our metal community. So head over to nightdemon.net/subscriber. And join us as we make heavy metal history together as one. And on a side note, I'll personally think you're a grade A badass. So Night Demon in early 2013, they continued to play gigs. There's some cool show posters that come out of this era, done by Eric Kudla. And you can check them out in the subscriber section on nightdemon.com. But you can see that Night Demon's really kind of cementing their visual style as far as their logo, their media, and their posters. But January 28th marks another first for Night Demon, their first Los Angeles show.
In the early winter, Night Demon played our very first show in Los Angeles. There was one opening band, and then we were up. And we were followed by this band, Hollywood Jesus, really cool guys that had John Locks from Warbringer, who we had met. And then Ex Mortis, who we became very good friends with. But this was the first time that we had met them.
Hey, this is Mario Moreno from Without Death Merch and ex-drummer of Ex Mortis. In 2013, I feel like extreme metal was more dominating, and there wasn't really bands that had the kind of traditional rock heavy metal sound that Night Demon was doing, at least not throughout the scene. It was kind of maybe just here and there, but I just remember that really made Night Demon stick out to me. I want to say the first time I saw Night Demon was in LA, but I just remember being blown away about how awesome a three-piece band could sound, and the tunes were just so catchy, and I just remember being hooked like right away. I was like, dude, these guys rock so hard.
So just to put this into context, where we grew up in Ventura was only an hour north of LA, but for us, it was like a whole nother country. So like, going to LA, before Guitar Center was a big thing, it was only in Hollywood, or when we would have to go to big concerts, we'd have to go to LA. So growing up out here, that's where things were happening. As we've said many times before, there was no scene for metal in Ventura, and there never really ever was. In LA, you had so many bands. I mean, hard rock and heavy metal, besides the UK, places like LA and New York. I mean, this is where this stuff, was born. And of course, we have the whole 80s Sunset Strip thing that happened. And, I mean, that influenced us in some way too and affected us when we were younger, because we knew about that stuff happening. It just was never happening where we were from. And when you're young and you can't drive and your parents have to take you everywhere, it's like, LA was basically, like I said, it was like another country, and it seemed just so far away because there's not much in between Ventura and LA as far as any kind of scene for anything. So, when I was old enough to drive, I started to go to LA, once a week, and I was going to shows on school nights and just soaking it up, everything, every which way I could. And, previous bands that we were in growing up, we'd go down to the Whiskey and play and do the whole pay to play thing and sell 50 tickets and hope to get discovered and hope that, I mean, it's just that Hollywood story, right? And even Dusty can attest to that, when with him moving out west with New Liberty. I mean, one of the first things they did was hit the Sunset Strip, and they're like, whoa, this place is like not what we thought it was. This isn't like the 80s anymore. Of course it's not. But, so LA is just such a large metropolis. And when we finally got out there to play a show, I mean, it was something that we definitely needed to do as a band. We needed to break out a little bit more. And, as the progression has gone along, also, as we've talked about in these early days episodes, is the band started to take itself a little bit more seriously. But playing this show in LA was the catalyst that really threw it overboard. Like if I, looking back on all of this, if I had to pick one incident or one scenario that was kind of the deciding factor, it was this night. It was this specific night. So to give you a little bit of context, this is not me. This is not a woe is me moment. This is not me just being a victim, but I do feel that telling our personal journey through life is very valuable to telling the whole story of Night Demon, because personal lives and emotions and all that stuff really do play out in what we do in our lives and the things that we go for. And it determines our motivations for the way we carry our lives out. So with that preface, I was at a job for a long time, and I worked in the Valley, which is basically the armpit of LA. So it's between Ventura and downtown LA, and it's just not a very desirable area. And it's kind of like, where, if you can't afford to live in nicer LA, you live in the Valley. I mean, many of you who've watched many Hollywood films kind of know about this. So, I was just in a very unfulfilling position in my life. And, I was just over 30 years old, and I had what I felt like, no life or no skills, no job skills. I wouldn't say I didn't have life skills. I had a ton of life experience, but, it was just a dismal thing. And, I was working in the music business too. So what I was doing is I was meeting all of these rock stars and really helping them out. And I was just doing a lot of things for other people. And my music was basically a hobby. And it was, I would tour on vacations, and with the heartbeats and stuff on vacation from work. And I would constantly be stressed about that while I was gone. And, I just got to a point where I just kind of said, like, what the things that we actually do in our lives is what we do. That's when we can say we do something. If somebody, were to ask me what do you do? My first reaction would always be, oh, well, I'm a musician, and that's how I felt inside. That's who I was at heart. But what I really was the manager of an audio repair company in the Valley. So I just had to start saying it, and it helped me a lot in the journey to transition. So I would complain about my job all the time to John and Brent. I mean, poor guys. Like, I would come home from work, after, 10, 11 hours a day, including my commute, and we would rehearse at night. And it was just, my attitude was terrible because I just hated my life. And I felt like I was a slave and a prisoner to this. But, in reality, looking back, it was a choice. I was making my own choices, and that suffering was something that I chose by not having the courage to walk away from something like that. And, just because of the fear of thinking that there was nothing else out there for me and I was going to be broke and homeless. So in January, in the early winter of 2013, when we went down to play this LA show, I was in a really, really, really bad spot. And I was just, I loved what the heartbeats were doing, but I was losing some steam on it. But I really, really loved what was happening with Night Demon. I looked forward to going to rehearsal. I loved the vibe of everything that we were doing. It was capturing the things that I wanted to do in my youth. And I felt like I was finally skilled enough to do the things that I wanted to do. I'd been playing music long enough that I had arrived at that level, but I was still in this shitty situation in my life. And I thought I was too old. And there's all these other factors, drugs and alcohol played a factor in it too. And, I made a lot of bad decisions in my personal life. But on this particular night, I remember it was a Monday night. It was a metal Monday. And we played at a club in downtown LA called the Down and Out. And I remember John and Brent coming to my work in the Valley and picking me up. And I was just in a really bad headspace. I was kind of nervous for the show, but really I was just still in the mindset that there were no expectations with Night Demon. And so I didn't expect us to have, the big LA Hollywood discovery, the thing that we all wanted our whole lives, the thing when we would go down and play LA. I mean, I even remember in high school going down to the Troubadour with Armand's band, The Whereabouts, when we were in high school and like roadieing for them. And like, we've been trying to do this for so long, And so I just got to a really bad spot. And I remember when we got to the venue, this place was like 1 block away from Skid Row. So it's like the worst part of downtown LA. People are getting murdered, robbed, all kinds of shit. And we went to the front door, and the security guy had this huge like scar on his face. It went all the way down, like he had gotten knifed from like the top of his scalp down to his chin. I mean, he was an okay guy, but it was just kind of like, whoa, like, he fit the scene for sure. But I remember he searched everything. He opened our drum cases, guitar cases, searched us personally every time we went in and out of the door to load something in. So that was kind of the danger level of this place. So and it was just a small club, maybe probably 150 people fit in this place. And I don't know. I think all of the stress of that got to me and the stress of my life. And I was just in a very bad spot. And I'm going to say something here. And I don't, again, this is I'm not a victim and I'm not looking for sympathy, but I think it's important in our history, the truth. But I remember telling Brent after we loaded in, and we were just kind of standing around. We didn't know anybody. I told him, I said, I think I'm going to kill myself tonight. And he was like, whoa, what? And, I mean, what I do remember about that conversation and what I do remember about, what he said, I think at the time I was maybe just kind of trying to reach out. And, I felt that he hadn't really helped me. But to his credit, I mean, like, come on, what do you say to something like that, And I do remember him saying, like, look, I'm not good at this stuff. I mean, at least he was upfront about it. He's like, look, I'm not good at this stuff, and I don't know what to say, but just please don't do that. Like you can't do that. And man, I talk about these suicidal ideations in the song Kill the Pain that we released in 2020, which I'm sure we're going to cover soon enough. But, I do think it's important to discuss these things. As difficult as it is for me, I do think it's important. So anyway, I just said, you know what? I'm going to play this show and I'm going to play it like it's my last because it in my mind, it was. So we went up there and we had these 3 red lights. We had a backdrop and then we had these 3 really old stage lights, hot as fuck park hands, and we placed them on the floor and they would just shoot right up in our faces. So we couldn't really see anything, but we asked them to turn off all the lights in the bar and all the neon signs, and it completely transformed the vibe in there. And we had just our little smoke machine going the entire time, filled up this bar with smoke, and we just went out there and we kicked fucking ass, and it was raw as fuck, and people absolutely loved it. I mean, it was fucking insane. And in that moment, when I got off stage, a switch just like flicked in my head. And it was almost like, basically I decided, like, look, I'm not going to take the cowardly way out. I'm not going to leave the people that care about me. I'm not going to ruin their lives by leaving this world because I'm too afraid to chase my passions. And it's almost like that scene in Goodfellas. For anybody that's seen that movie, if you haven't, you must. It's one of the best Scorsese flicks. But when they're going to kill Maury, and De Niro's character is telling he keeps talking about it to Henry Hill throughout the night, like, tonight's the night, we're gonna do it, and they're like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right, and they have some drinks and things go well. And then De Niro's character kind of says to Ray Liotta's character, Henry Hill, he kind of says, hey, just, forget about what I said earlier. Forget about it, And that's kind of like how I was with Brent. I was just like, hey, remember what I said earlier? Yeah, no, forget about it. And I don't know how the hell he was supposed to take that. I mean, what a crazy, schizophrenic way to act on my part, and
there was redemption in playing a show like it's my last. And I told myself I'm going to do that with every gig that ever happens from that point on. And, my advice to anybody who's thinking about leaving this mortal plane to their, by their own devices, just go to sleep and wake up tomorrow and then think about it. Give yourself some time. Life can change on a dime. It really can, and it does, okay? It's not that it only can, it does. And, your emotions are like waves. You just have to ride the wave and get through it. Whether it's good or bad, there'll be another wave that comes, but the water will settle. And I think it's very, very, very important to just take the time and don't overthink it. Don't think about things. Just think about what you want in your life. That's it. It's scientifically proven that you can't have a negative thought and a positive thought at the same time. And the positive thoughts will do something to you emotionally. It will change your physiology for the better. And you have to have some hope and you have to have some goals. Even if you don't know what those goals are, you have to be thinking about it. You have to be asking yourself the questions about what you want. And then that does eventually become clear.
So the first time we actually played in LA, my friend Joe Jughead and his buddy Paul had been doing shows around LA, a bunch of shows, metal and punk shows. And, obviously we sent him the Night Demon stuff. I was like, hey man, put us on a show. He put us on a show. And we get down there and this is a metal show, full on metal show. We show up with our lights, our smoke, just what we do. And, turned on, rocked out, played really good, I think. What I remember, it was really good. We were really stoked on the band. We're like, yeah, oh yeah, this is it. People were super stoked on it. Everyone was like, this band rules. You guys are awesome. And I think that's when it started to get more serious, trying to get better shows and trying to do more with the band.
So the very next day, I walked into work and I said, I quit. And, my bosses they have heard this from me before and, throughout the years. And every time I did that, I got a raise and I felt good for about 10 minutes. I walked back to my desk and felt like a cheap whore because I was basically, I was getting paid more money, but I was still doing the shit that I didn't want to do. And now, since I've been quote unquote rewarded, I'm supposed to be grateful for this. And that's really what put into perspective that, money in the material world is not as fulfilling. I mean, yes, we need money and we need things, but do we really? I mean, there's nothing wrong with money and there's nothing wrong with certain forms of materialism, but ultimately when you're spending most of your time and most of your life doing something you hate just to live, I mean, there's other ways about it. So I basically decided that I was done and I was going to go full time into Night Demon. This was it. Something magical had happened and I just felt it in my bones that if I don't give this 100% of my effort, it's not going to happen. And, if it's certainly not going to happen if I stay the way that I am. So, in order to have a different life, you have to, if you want different results, you have to do different things. So was it scary? Yeah, it was fucking scary. And I basically had to tell everybody around me, my family and friends, and say, look, I may end up the guy in the gutter. You know, I may end up homeless. I mean, which I did. But, you know, I never got to gutter level. Thank God. Thanks for a lot of people helping me out along the way. But that was the decision. It's like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. So if that means that I have no social life anymore because I can't afford it, or because I've alienated people because I can't participate in the activities that we do, that was fine with me, because those activities had gotten me to that point in my life where I was so unhappy that I was ready to leave, you know? And that was a very empowering moment. And my bosses basically convinced me to stay for another year. Well, actually, first they offered me a stake in the company. And I just thought, man, I've been down this road before, and I just can't do this. There's no amount of money that can make me happy doing this. And so I helped them restructure the company, and they agreed to give me a severance. And so I stayed actually for another 8 months is what I did. And I trained, I had to train 3 other people to do my job. They hired 3 people to do my job. And that told me a lot. I was like, wow, look at how much effort I put into this, where it takes 3 people to replace me. And they don't want to let me go. You know, what if I did this for my band? What if I did this for my own life? And that's exactly what happened. So this show at the Down and Out was the thing that completely changed my life. And I'm glad that I hung in there. And again, to everybody out there going through something like that, you have to hang in, okay? You got to do it. If you're not going to do it for yourself, at least do it for the people that love and care about you.
So the first LA show with Ex Mortis is a turning point for Jarvis and for Night Demon. And that's all the time we have for this episode, so be sure to check out the subscriber section on nightdemon.net for show posters for the shows in this episode. There's a video of Jarvis's big day out, as Dusty calls it. There's pictures of the jam space and the fundraiser gig, plus tons of audio and video and image galleries for the past 60 plus episodes. Until next time, this is Nesbitt signing off.
Thanks for listening to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. Head over to nightdemon.net, click on the subscriber tab, and sign up to access exclusive weekly bonus content. If you would like to donate to support the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast, you can do so through PayPal at paypal.me/nightdemonmetal. Additionally, if you have not already done so, please subscribe, like, rate, and review the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All hail, Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast listeners. This is Dusty Squires chiming in to tell you about my brand new signature sticks from the London Drumstick Company. I've dreamt of having my very own drumsticks ever since I was a wee lad, and LDC made that a possibility for me. Founded in 2016 in London, England, the birthplace of heavy metal, the London Drumstick Company has trailblazed a path through the music industry and taken the drummer world by storm. When I met them for the first time, they knew their product was going to withstand the beatings of a Night Demon show. They took the time to work with me on getting everything just right. The balance and weight of my sticks are the same no matter what, and the durability is bar none the best I've ever had. I know my sticks will last through the set night after night. I'm truly honored to work with a company that caters to their players the way LDC does. Their innovation and attention to detail is what separates them from the rest of the stick makers out there. Their custom stick sleeves are unbelievable and really make the entire presentation complete. Wait until you see the design they came up with for me. It blew my mind and was a surprise to say the least. They have all kinds of amazing swag, including hoodies, t-shirts, drummer shorts, drum keys, stick bags, towels, face masks, practice pads, and much, much more. Even if you're not a drummer, you can be a part of Demon history and order my brand new signature sticks direct from their website. How cool is that? And to top it off, the London Drumstick Company are giving an exclusive offer to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast listeners. Go to londondrumsticks.co.uk and receive a 15% store-wide discount using promo code DEMONSTICKS. All capital letters, no spaces, Demon Sticks. DEMONSTICKS. I can't thank everyone there enough for the opportunity to be a part of their family and for them trusting me with their amazing products. See you metal maniacs on the road very soon. And yes, the wood chips will be flying.
Greetings, boils and ghouls. This is your comrade, the Crypt Keeper here, reporting dead from the sanctuary of the strange. Tonight's macabre myth is a fright-filled feature, one overflowing with monsters, madness, and magic.
Visit our website at monstersmadnessandmagic.com to stay up to date on all the dark dealings within the sanctuary of the strange. Enjoy the show.
Hey Metalheads, I'm Mark and I host the Metal Forge. Let me tell you about the show. The Metal Forge features the best underground metal from all over the world. We spend every week with a different artist with interviews, in-depth conversations, and most of all, the music. We also feature audience interactivity where you can submit your questions to the upcoming guests. New episodes are out every Friday at noon Eastern Time at metalforgeradio.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking Podcast, a non-genre based, all-ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
Okay, metalheads, you've been complaining that there has not been a channel that plays all of the heavy metal videos from past, present, and future for years and years at this point. Well, that time is over. Heavy Metal Television is back. HeavyMetalTelevision.net is the website. Go there. You can see videos playing 24/7, 365, all the time, all the best from the old school, the new school, and everything in between. Check it out, HeavyMetalTelevision.net. It is where the metal is.